SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to today's lecture. We have started to discuss the important topics related to mineral resources. That is the environmental impact of mineral resource exploitation. And in the introductory discussion, we saw the spectrum of the impact, starting from exploration to the beginning of the mining processes, and the mining of various different types of deposits. The ore deposits are pretty wide in there. So there could be metallic oxide mines, there are non-metallic mines, and but the large class of mines, which are essentially the mines of multi-metal sulfide deposits, they do pose some additional problems in addition to the landscape, affecting the landscape, noise, the dust, and many of the other environmental impacts that mining activities have. So these multi-metal sulfide deposits do have some additional deleterious effect on the environment, and which have to be properly understood and evaluated. So we just made a beginning on our discussion on the impact of multi-metal sulfide deposits, and we are discussing on the topic of the acid mine drainage or the acid rock drainage. Essentially, the acid rock drainage originates because of the fact that the ore body, which has a good model proportion of the mineral pyrite or its polymorph, which is marcasite, both being iron disulfide in their composition. When these ore bodies are exposed to the surface oxygen along with the moisture, they react with the ore body which is exposed, the pyrite, and generate copious amount of sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and which we have seen in details some of the mechanisms, the reactions that produce the AMD. And we also saw that the pyrite, which is a dominant sulfide mineral in many multi-metal sulfide deposits, could be called as the culprit, because 1 mole of pyrite generates 4 moles of hydrogen plus ion, the proton, which is actually which causes the lowering of the pH or the acute acidity, sometimes going to values as low as 1.5 or 2. And when they get in contact with the surface water or the surface stagnant water or the running water, they adversely affect the biota. One of the most important aspect is that this particular low acid water, which is the sulfide, which is the acid rock drainage, has tremendous solubility of different metals, which also gets carried away in the water, which is the acid mine water, which is released into the surrounding, generally discharged to the flowing water, which is a river nearby. And the process is facilitated by microorganisms like the thioacidobacillus or the acidobacillus desulfuricans kind of bacterial species. There are quite a number of such species which are identified, and sometimes the oxidation is also by iron 3 plus, where we see that the generation of acid or the S plus ion is still very copious, and the kinetics of this oxidation process and generation of this acid mine drainage is far more when it is bacterially assisted or bacterially facilitated rather than done inorganically. So the process is facilitated by microorganisms. They survive on the energy that is liberated by this oxidation process, because in most of the reactions that we wrote for the oxidation of the sulfide minerals, there we didn't write how much of energy is released. Actually, it is quite significant, and the microorganisms which assist such kind of reduction of this, or such kind of oxidation of this iron sulfide and release of H plus ions and rendering the water very acidic, is also they survive in this process. And the AMD gives rise to formation of a plethora of a good number of secondary sulfates and oxide species. Essentially, the sulfates like jarosite, phosmonite, and many of the other sulfide species like copiapite, ferrocopiapite, all these minerals which also precipitate from this AMD and imparting its that yellow color, which is known as the yellow boy. These secondary sulfates are also these secondary sulfate minerals. They can absorb a good amount of the heavy metals on their surface, which we are not dealing them in details, such kind of adsorption desorption processes for the sake of time, and but they remain focus of study in many of the evaluation or the environmental impact assessment due to sulfide mining, and their exact way in which these so once, as you have seen, many of these secondary sulfates, they get converted to their respective, as pH increases and the conditions become more anhydrous, they get converted to their respective iron oxide, hydroxy oxides like goethite, which actually releases or which doesn't possess that much of surface property for a significant adsorption of this kind of heavy metals, and so they are again released to the environment, and these have to be very carefully monitored to arrive at a conclusion as regards to the impact of the sulfide mining. And additionally, the tailing dams, which we have not seen them in much detail, so we are not able to see them in much details. The tailing dams are also equally hazardous, because there the material which are after the tailings, which are the discarded material after the beneficiation of the ore, they also do contain a minor amount of the sulfides, and they get accumulated in huge quantity in the structures which are called as tailing dam or the tailing impoundments, and they keep on accumulating with their pore water, and they sometimes they have all the potentials to, and they are the conditions which are prevailing there is reducing, and then they do also have the potential to dissolve quite a lot of such metals, and then contaminating the groundwater depending on the position of the water table in the area with respect to the tailing impoundment. There can be a lot more which could be studied about the tailing impoundment, but we'll just be so here just for your it's just for your preliminary knowledge that this is a it's interesting to see. This is a photograph from the Malanjkhand mines tailing dam, which is situated with the photograph, which the Google Map image which I showed in the previous class. This what we could see is that the areas which we could see some of the portions like such barriers which have been formed here are by the coarse grained fraction of the tailing, because the tailing which is coming is containing size fractions from clay, silt to almost sand sized particles, and we could see here that this is one of the points at which the slurry, thick slurry is getting discharged, and this part is the freshly deposited tailing in the tailing dam, and the other part which is shown here is essentially the part where the tailing has been accumulating for a good number of time. Now, since this tailing is consisting of all sorts of particle size from clay and silt, so they do pose a very interesting type of environmental problem here. So during the dry and the hot seasons, these fine particles, when this part of the dam which is not actively receiving the slurry, the majority part, like the ones which are shown here, it's a huge area as shown in the Google map before. So this part in the very hot and dry seasons, the action of the very hot and very forceful wind, these particles are released and are carried as dust or taken as particulate matter in air and are taken far off, and the nearby areas, the villages, the water bodies and the agricultural fields are all affected by falling of this kind of materials in form of ash flow and dust which contaminate the area. And so it's not particularly the case of Malanskhand. There are other areas where such kind of tailing dams do contain some toxic metals, then the areas will also get affected, where in case of this particular one is not actually known very well. But so now we'll be just discussing very briefly a topic which is just that how do we actually quantify or somehow roughly or semi-quantitatively estimate the impact of sulphide mining in the form of the acid mine drainage. So if there are acid mine drainage, then we always think of that whether there could be ways and means to remediate them, or there are naturally or in the nature itself, whether there are situations in which the acid which is being generated can get neutralized. So as we all know that the acid that is generated, acid water, can possibly get neutralized, and the neutralization capability which is shown here is there could be carbonates, there could be lime or the metal hydroxides or the silicates in almost a decreasing order of their efficiency in the capability of neutralizing the acid water. So if there are within the overburden or within the ore body itself, within the overburden or the surrounding rocks, if we have a dominance of the carbonate minerals, say for example calcite, then it has the capability of absorbing or acting as a sink for the hydrogen ion that is generated. Similarly, the case of calcium hydroxide, metal hydroxides and silicates, more importantly the silicates like the ferromagnesian silicates, like even some of the cases like the hornblende or biotite, they do get hydrolyzed by this acidic water and give rise to alteration products and neutralize the water. Or if there are some silicates like potash feldspar, they also get altered to clays, and thus they can buffer the pH or could elevate or could neutralize the pH. So in the context of this acid mine drainage, we generally express them in these three different parameters. One is called the acid potential, means exactly the way we could quantify that the material which is the ore containing certain percentage of the sulphide minerals, what is its acid potential, means how much of acid it will liberate. And then we will see the neutralization potential, means the materials that are present in the ore body, how they will be able to neutralize the acid. And then we would express in terms of a net acid producing potential. That means the neutralization potential, the difference between the neutralization potential and the acid potential will be a net acid producing potential, which needs to be ascertained to know that whether a particular mining activity would actually generate acid mine drainage or will not generate, will not that be effective. And so we know that these are the things, the complexation, redox reactions, sorption, that means the adsorption and desorption kind of processes, and microbial activity, microbiological activity are all controlling these parameters. Now for this kind of environmental impact assessment, there are many types of studies which are done. They are the kind of tests which are called as the static tests. Say acid base accounting is one such kind of static test, There are kinetic tests in which the materials could be studied in the form of putting them in columns and do the experiment in the laboratory. So acid base accounting is kind of a static test because it's a one time experimentation, and the result that is obtained can be reported or can be assessed, whereas in case of the tests which is done with columns, where the fluid is made to, it's essentially stimulating a natural condition of acid mine drainage by taking water, either a distilled water or water of any natural composition, and then allowing the water to react with the ore for different periods of time, and then can monitor that with progress of time how the composition of the water is changing, and such kind of tests are done. And there are many other types of tests which are done for actual quantitative evaluation of the acid generation or the generation of the acid mine drainage. So here the prediction whether sulfuric geologic materials are capable of producing acidic drainage is the key component and the most cost effective means for predicting ARD. So if you could see here that this is a series of compositional analysis and calculations which will be involved, like analysis of pH. It is generally we do something like we report as a paste pH, like getting the material pulverized to very fine particle and then treating with deionized water and monitoring the pH of the water, which can be reported. So that gives us a qualitative idea as to almost a quantitative idea of what kind of a pH we can expect for the acid mine drainage. Analysis of the sulfur species and calculation of the acid potential. Here it's mostly presumed that the sulfidic sulfur is the culprit and which generally generates the acid mine drainage, where the sulfate sulfur, like say for example the sulfate being present in the form of gypsum or any other kind of sulfate minerals, will not be potentially acid generating. So only the sulfidic sulfur will be acid generating. And the analysis of the neutralization potential and the calculation of something called a net potential ratio, or the this neutralization potential by acid potential, which gives us the net potential ratio, and the neutralization potential difference between the neutralization potential and the acid generation potential, which gives something like a net neutralization potential. Now here the calculation goes like this. So the future potential for the acid drainage depends on the relative concentration and the reaction rates, that is acid generating sulfur minerals, the AP, which is the sulfides, and the neutralizing minerals. Neutralizing minerals, as has been listed, could be carbonates, could be metal hydroxides, or could be silicates. So the relative magnitude of the neutralization potential and the acid potential is indicated by this ratio, which is NP by AP, which is the neutralization potential ratio, and NPR. Now here the calculation goes like this. The acid potential is reported as kilogram of calcium carbonate equivalents per ton of the material that is there in the sulfide, which can be compared with the neutralization potential. And while calculating the acid potential, a factor of 31.25 is multiplied to the percentage of sulfur present as sulfide sulfur to the material. So that means the percent acidic sulfide and the percent acidic sulfate. As I said, that percent this is almost negligible. So whatever amount is present as sulfidic sulfur is multiplied by a factor of 31.25 to arrive at a figure which is the acid potential. And then so this also, it's kind of the amount that is required, one calcium carbonate equivalent per ton, that is based on. So if we see these two reactions, the first one is that this is the pyrite, the inorganically induced reaction, which is basically giving rise to 4 hydrogen plus ion, and in this case we can see that this calcite CaCO3 is consuming 2 hydrogen ion to give rise to calcium and H2CO3. So here this particular reaction is taking place at a low pH conditions, so that's what it's able to accommodate the 2 hydrogen ion and to give rise to H2CO3. And this particular if we calculate the reaction equilibria, we know that at what value of pH it will be equilibrated, and this value will essentially be a value where that means the acidity is actually decreased or the pH is increased. So these two neutralization reactions, one is calcium carbonate plus 2H is calcium 2 plus H2CO3, which happens at an acidic pH. pH is less than 6.3. If the pH is a little higher, it's more than 6.3, then it can accommodate only 1 hydrogen ion and will give rise to a bicarbonate ion. So as we know that there is a distinct difference between the pH of these two fluids. So reaction 1 used in the calculation of acid potential predominates below 6.3, and the reaction 2, which requires twice as much neutralization potential to neutralize each mole of H plus, predominates at high pH. So with reaction 1, an NPR of less than 1 is required to produce ARD. In this case, the net potential, neutralization potential ratio is less than 1 is required to produce ARD, where in this reaction 2, a neutralization potential of greater than 2 is required to prevent the ARD. So under near neutral pH conditions, the microsites with both reactions 1 and 2 are likely to occur. Consequently, the NP by AP or the NPR required to generate ARD will be between 1 and 2. So in addition, you may also have pH when it is less than 4. The calcium carbonate would be reacting with H2SO4 to give rise to calcium sulfate, carbon dioxide and water, which is also an important reaction for neutralization of the acid which is generated. So these are the reactions that we can think of in the. So this is kind of a to conclude this topic of the. So there could possibly be a lot more which could be discussed with in connection with the acid mine drainage, the as a impact of sulfide mining, but which involves a lot of exercise and understanding the thing into greater details with the sorption kind of process, and understanding exactly the methods which we just discussed about the static and the other methods which are involved. So here we can just take a rough figure. If the material contains about 9.5% sulfide sulfur, all assuming to be pyrite, the rest of the material would have to be calcium carbonate to meet the 3:1 criteria. So in if a particular ore body has the sulfide and then dominantly the host rock to be a carbonate rock, then and in the ratio of 3:1, then you can safely assume that this particular deposit will not be generating an acid mine drainage. Also, and then you take the parameters of your NPR and then neutralization potential ratio, the acid potential and the neutralization potential ratio, and from the value as you would have calculated, you could also find out whether a particular ore body is going to be acid generating or not. So this provides an upper boundary for sulfide content, that is, if the sulfide sulfur is greater than 9%, no test is needed, it is acid producing. So it's very simple, the upper boundary of the sulfur. So if the sulfide sulfur in a particular ore body is greater than 9%, and it mostly have to be either a pyrite, a marcasite, as we know that all sulfides are not acid producing, like galena and sphalerite kind of mineral, they don't generate any AMD, whereas the sulfides such as the pyrite, they generate the AMD. So if the sulfide sulfur is greater than 9%, then there is no test which is needed, it is acid producing. So this we conclude the discussion on the environmental impact of the mineral exploitation in relation to the sulphide or the multimetal sulphide deposits. We will continue our discussion in the next class.